All right, so we are live. Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of Pro Seller Talk. My guest today is Anna Hill. Anna Hill is going to come in today and talk about taxes and accounting. And I just think at this time of the year, it's a great time to bring somebody in that knows about taxes and can share some information with us. And she's probably going to tell you that, she's only going to give you advice, not tell you what to do, because she doesn't want to get into that situation, but she's here. She's going to put together a nice presentation for us and hopefully help you guys with how to file your taxes, set goals, budgets, those type of things. So again, hey, Anna, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I appreciate you letting me join the fun. I love your accent, by the way. But I appreciate you guys letting me join everyone. I have about 20 years experience as a CPA, but I am also an online seller. A lot of times people are surprised to find that out. I actually prefer selling online. Actually, I prefer sourcing. We all know that's the fun part. I enjoy that a lot. I like shopping. I'm working on a private label line right now, but I've been selling since January 2014, and I'm happy to share my accounting knowledge with everybody. And I hope you guys will chime in with questions. And with that, I'm just going to get going. And John, thank you so much for having me. Let me know if you have any thoughts you want to interject along the way.
It's my pleasure. And I'm going to mute for right now until I need to come
Okay.
in. Okay.
So what I want to talk about is the accounting routine. I want to talk about that on a yearly, quarterly, and monthly basis. And hopefully this will give you an opportunity to consider what you're doing with your accounting records, what's working, and then also what you might want to work on for this year, next year, and the following year. We all know, excuse me, as business owners, the way that we manage and grow our business evolves over time. We had that period where we're first starting, we didn't know what we were doing, we're kind of crawling. Then we're standing, then we're walking, then we're running. And I'm going to talk about what the ideal routine looks like. That doesn't mean that you should feel bad if you're not doing this right now. And if you are doing this now, this might give you some options of where you can find two things, or even make suggestions back to the group about what works for you that isn't exactly what I'm saying. Like everything, there's more than one way to do something. So I'm going to give you an overview of what works for me and a lot of the sellers I work with. And again, I am a CPA and I'm also a seller, and I have a lot of experience kind of bridging both of those worlds. So I hope you guys find this helpful. All right, so first we're going to talk about yearly, and what I really want to avoid is reading off of the sheet of paper. I have this as a guide. I'm happy to share this with everyone. It's also my accounting group, but I'm going to use this as the guide. And then obviously the first thing is filing taxes. I really think if it wasn't for filing taxes, a lot of people wouldn't ever bother with their books. How many of us have said, oh my gosh, it's almost April 15th. I better get busy, or I better file that extension, or, maybe your due date is March 15th, depending on the entity. But that filing taxes is the one driving thing that we must do. Everything else is optional. Is it a good idea to not do everything else? No, but just know that's the one thing. The IRS is expecting you to file your taxes, and I think we all know that. Some other things you might want to look at: insurance. We all know Amazon requires certain insurance levels. That's a good annual thing to do. And then review your retirement and savings goals, modify the plan if needed. The reason I say that is it's really important that your business meet your personal financial goals. And the reason I say that is we all define success differently. And I think what happens in this business is people get into a place where they are trying to increase sales, compare with so-and-so, maybe in a mastermind, and you have some friendly competition. Well, I think that's great. We all know that sales aren't really the driver of the bottom line necessarily, because you can increase sales and have smaller margins and still have the same amount in your pocket. So what I want you to do is think about, what are your personal financial goals? Are your goals to create savings, save for retirement, pay for your kids' student loans, pay for your own student loans, maybe take a vacation? Maybe it's to get out of a traditional 8 to 5 Monday through Friday job. Whatever your personal financial goals are, identify those, write them down, because that is the driver for you. The driver is, how can I make sure that my business is meeting my personal financial goals? And once you determine that, then the way that we measure that is through having our books in order. I know this sounds kind of obvious, but it's a little bit like losing weight or gaining weight. You're never going to know if you're meeting your goals if you don't have a scale. And I see accounting records as the scale. If you're trying to work on your weight loss or weight gain, whatever it is, let's just say weight loss, you don't weigh yourself once a year. You probably weigh once a week. I think with accounting, it's really similar. You may not want to do it weekly, but at least monthly. Quarterly is better than not monthly. Once a year is really not enough, especially in an inventory-based business. And I know that everyone listening is here because they want to do better and they want to do more. So you have these yearly goals, but then you want to break them down a little bit further into the quarterly goals. You can compare your financial statements to the previous quarter, so maybe Q1 to Q2. But what I think is a little bit more informative is Q4 2016 to Q4 2015, because we have the seasonality about our business. And I think how you do in comparative quarters is better. You want to pay quarterly taxes if that's something that your business is set up to do. And then the other thing you want to think about, at least quarterly, is review important ratios. And I'm going to get a little bit more into this, but one important ratio is the debt to unsold inventory. The debt to unsold inventory is a relationship between how much you owe to how much your business has. And the analogy I like to use is a house. So let's say you own a home, but you have a mortgage. And the home value is $200,000 and the mortgage is $150,000. That means that you have equity of $50. And I want you to think of your business the same way. Think about the house equivalent to how much you have in checking in your inventory. Those are your assets. And then I want you to think about the mortgage, the liabilities, the loans and the credit cards that you have. So if you have an asset, which is checking plus inventory, you want to make sure that number is well above the liabilities, which are your loans. And this is what I'm talking about, the debt, the relationship between the debt to unsold inventory. And I just want to check in. Does anyone have any questions on this before I move forward? It's an important concept because this is all about balance sheet management, assets compared to liabilities. You never ever want to owe more than your business is worth. And without knowing those numbers, you can't manage and grow your business. And it looks like everyone's okay. We don't have any questions yet, so I'm going to move forward. So right here is the monthly routine, and I'm going to go through what this looks like. And this example assumes that you already have an accounting software set up. And before I go into the monthly routine, I want to talk a little bit about options. Some sellers like to use QuickBooks. Some sellers like to use Xero. It depends on what you're comfortable with. Xero and Xero and QuickBooks are comparable products. They're about, I think, 5 different versions of QuickBooks. From my experience, what I found is that QuickBooks Simple Start works for most sellers. QuickBooks Simple Start is less than, I think right now they have a special, it's $10 a month, but in general, it's less than $15 a month. I know that we all want to be careful about costs, but if we can buy efficiencies, I think accounting software is one, then we definitely want to do that. All right, so the way that it works is you establish your accounting software. And this example assumes you already have made your selection, you're using Xero or QuickBooks, whatever it is, and now you're going to go through the monthly process. So the first thing you're going to do each month is you're going to import the transactions to the accounting software. What that means is you establish a bank feed, and your bank or credit card is connected or feeding into, or as some people say, talking to your accounting software. So that means that each month, as you have transactions with your credit card and you have transactions with your business checking account, those transactions come into your accounting software. And once they come into the accounting software, it is your job to tell the software what those transactions relate to. And that's number 2, or the second bullet point. You're going to categorize the transaction to the appropriate account. And when I say account, I'm not talking checking account, credit card account. I'm talking about accounting account. Some people like to call it a bucket. So you have the inventory bucket, you have the shipping supplies bucket, you have the dues and education, the training, the subscription bucket. So what you're going to do is you're going to categorize each transaction to the appropriate account. So again, the bank feeds are established. The bank feeds feed the data into the accounting software. And once they're feeding in, then you categorize and you say, okay, I see here is $100 to target. I'm going to categorize that to inventory. Oh, look here, I have $75 to Uline. I'm going to categorize that to shipping supplies. And hopefully that makes sense. Do you guys have any questions before I move forward? I don't want to, it's a little bit hard to explain when I'm saying it. I can see it in my mind, but hopefully it makes sense. You're just pulling in the transactions and then you're telling the software what each transaction relates. All right, so the next thing you do is, okay, thank you, Ada. Ada says she's following and she understands. Once you categorize the transactions and you tell the software which bucket each transaction belongs to, the next thing you do is you're going to record the deposit from the e-commerce channel. And I want to explain a little bit about that. As you guys know, when you're selling on Amazon, Amazon pays most of us on a biweekly basis. Some people get paid more often. No matter what frequency you get paid, the deposit that comes into your account is a net amount. And what I mean by that is you have gross sales minus fees equals cash in the bank. So let's use numbers. And this isn't probably realistic, but let's say you had $30,000 worth of sales and you had $10,000 worth of Amazon fees and your deposit was $20,000. When the $20,000 comes into your checking account, you're going to categorize that as Amazon sales, but that is actually not your Amazon sales. Your Amazon sales were $30,000. So you go into the deposit and you adjust it to reflect the fact that you actually had $30,000 worth of sales, $10,000 worth of fees, and then $20,000 was cash in the bank. With eBay, a lot of people use PayPal to collect money, and PayPal will often net the same exact thing. Let's say you sold something for $75, but there was a $5 fee, so you got $70. You have to go into that transaction and make the adjustment.
Hey,
The
Anna,
next, oh yes.
I just stop you there for 1 second. Because you said something interesting, but there was one thing that I thought that you might want to add. You said $30,000 is your actual sales on Amazon. I get that point, and $10,000 was your fees for Amazon. But what I didn't hear is what about the cost of goods?
Right, and that's actually the next thing I'm going to discuss is calculating and recording the cost of goods sold. And I think, I don't know about you, John, but I think that's one of the most important aspects of accounting for an e-commerce business is the cost of goods.
Plus, I could have just read on the screen, but I didn't.
Well, you know what? I'm glad you didn't, because we are here to talk and not just read, because reading's boring. So. But I think that's a really good point. And if you think about it, we have 3 different elements to our business. Number 1 is the sales. Number 2 is cost of goods sold. And number 3 are all the other expenses, subscriptions, shipping supplies, prep services, all of those things. But calculating cost of goods sold is something that's really important. And I think what people forget is that's actually probably our biggest expense aside from the fees that we pay Amazon. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, sometimes it's the same. I think we've all heard that rule of thumb, the rule of threes, where a third is to pay ourselves back for inventory, a third is to pay Amazon, and a third goes in our pocket. So the part that we're talking about with cost of goods sold is the part where we pay ourselves back for inventory. And what this means is when you buy inventory, you don't expense the inventory until it sells. And there's a reason for that. And it's called the matching principle in accounting. And what that says is you must match revenues with expenses. It's kind of a principle or a law or a cornerstone of the accounting world. So if you think about it this way, if you did not expense inventory when it sells and instead you expensed it, or you took the expense when you buy it, you're not matching revenue with expense. And I'm going to use a real world example. Let's say I bought something for $20 and I immediately expensed the $20 and I took that off of my business. Well, when I sell that item, let's say I sell it a year later, then I take the revenue. But you don't have that proper matching of revenue with expenses. You want to be able to say, okay, I sold it for $50 and I'm going to reduce the 50 by 20 and my profit is 30. But if you take the expense immediately when you buy it and then when you sell it next year, you finally take the revenue, you're not matching the revenue with expense, and it's really hard to get a picture of how successful your business is. And if you take that by the aggregate of all of your inventory, you don't have an accurate picture unless you're expensing the inventory when it sells. And that's what cost of goods sold is. Just to go through the calculation, you take beginning inventory plus all of your purchases minus your ending inventory is cost of goods sold. So let's say you just started your business this year. Beginning inventory is 0. And then let's say you have purchases of, someone said, my head is spinning, I'm getting confused. So I'm going to walk slowly through an example, and it's going to be very simplified. Let's say you started your business this year, 2017, and you had 0 inventory on day 1. And then we're just going to use a 1-month cycle. So the beginning inventory is 0. Throughout the month, you bought $100 worth of inventory. Those are your purchases. So 0 beginning inventory plus $100 purchases is cost your entire universe of inventory you could have possibly sold. Now, let's say you sold $60 worth of inventory, and that means that you had $60 cost of goods sold and $40 was your ending inventory. And this is the problem with an inventory-based business. It gets complicated quickly, but let me just do it let me walk through it again one more time, and it's going to make sense. You started off this year, you had nothing. You bought $100 worth of inventory. You sold you sold $40 worth of inventory, and the ending inventory is $60. So beginning inventory plus purchases minus ending inventory is cost of goods sold. You can flip that around and you can say beginning inventory plus purchases minus cost of goods sold is ending inventory. So you need to get really familiar with that formula. It's probably the most important thing about running an inventory-based business. If you can get it, kind of run through it a couple of times. If you had beginning inventory of 0, you bought inventory of $100, cost of goods available for sale is $100. That means the entire universe that you could possibly sell is $100. Then if you sell $60 worth of inventory, that's your cost of goods sold, and your remainder is $40. And then it rolls forward to the next month, the next month, the next month. And it's something you really need to get a handle on because this is an inventory-based business. You always need to know how much you hold in unsold inventory. That number varies in comfort level depending on what you're trying to do with your business. I know some sellers who have $1 million in unsold inventory. I know some sellers who have 10,000 and they're comfortable with that. And that's what I'm talking about. Make sure your business meets your personal financial goals because that will kind of drive the amount of inventory you feel comfortable holding. No one wants to get outside of their comfort zone. And here's what happens. You end up looking at your sales and your expenses, and then you say, well, I think I made money, but then you don't know if you can pay yourself. Or maybe you pay yourself, but then you think, well, I don't have any more money to invest in inventory. And the reason is because you don't have a good handle on your unsold inventory. So Lisa has a great question. How do we keep track of what my cost of goods was when it's sold? What report do I need to run on Amazon to get that information? That's a really good question. There's 2 different ways you can do that. One is you can use an outside service like Inventory Lab or ScanPower Reports. Or the second way you can do it is you can run reports out of Amazon that tell you your unsold inventory, and you calculate cost of goods sold from that. And this is something a lot of sellers do just once a year at year end. I described it. It gets a little hairy pretty quickly. There are posts in my group that literally walk you through how to do it using all of the methods, but especially going into Amazon and you run certain reports. So you can go to my group. But basically what you do is you run a report and it tells you how many units of inventory you have on hand. And then you multiply the number of units times what you paid for each unit. And that tells you your ending inventory. And that you calculate cost of goods sold. Keep in mind the cost of goods sold calculation is probably the most difficult part of this business. But if you're doing your books for taxes, you only have to do it once a year. But I highly recommend you do this monthly because you really want to keep an eye on how much you have in unsold inventory. And the other benefit is you get practice. And once you practice and practice, you'll get used to it. And honestly, it should probably only take you about an hour or so once you get the system down pat. And you're always welcome to reach out to me if you have any trouble or you get stuck or you want me to look over what you've done. I'm happy to help. I do it all the time for people. So I'm just pausing for a moment to see if there are any questions. It looks like you guys are okay on that. So just to run back through it, the monthly routine, you're going to import the transactions to the accounting software. That means that you're feeding in all the transactions from your bank, your checking account, and your credit cards into the software. Then you categorize them to the proper account or bucket where you say, this is for inventory, this is for shipping supplies, whatever. Then you're going to record the deposit from the e-commerce channel. Next thing you do is calculate and record the cost of goods sold. After that, you might think you're done, but there's one more step and it's really important. You need to reconcile all of your accounts, your checking, your savings, your credit card, and your loans. When I say reconcile the accounts, what I mean is you want to make sure whatever the statement says, the bank statement or the credit card statement, is what your software says. The reason for that is you want to make sure that you don't have any differences between deleted something or changed a number. That's how you catch those little mistakes, and they're just going to happen. And it's really important to do this reconciliation step. Once you finish that, you've completed your monthly accounting cycle. And I promise you, you can boil this down to about 6 hours a month. It's really not that bad, depending on how many credit cards and the volume of transactions you have, but it should never take you more than a day or two for your entire monthly accounting process. I would say no more than a day once you figure out how to do it. Do you guys have any questions about that, or you feel pretty good about knowing what at least the ideal system would look like? I just want to check in before I move forward. Okay, so it looks like everyone is in pretty good shape on that. Again, feel free to ask any questions that you have. And some of this stuff is a little bit hard to talk about. It's sometimes easier to see it than just have the discussion about it. What I want to talk about next is receipt management and organization. As a final step to your monthly routine, what I recommend you do is you save all of your statements. You can see right here, I said save statements, bank and credit cards to a permanent file. I really like Dropbox. Some people like Evernote. I like Evernote also. I actually use it in addition to Dropbox, but just for saving statements, I think Dropbox is a good choice. I even say here I prefer Dropbox, and I have a folder by year, and then within each folder I have folders by month. In the monthly folder I save all of the statements. The reason I do this is I need to use them for reconciling my accounts, but I also need them if something ever happens. If I need to research something, if my CPA has a question, or if the IRS audits me, which I hope never happens to anybody, but if it does, you'll thank yourself if you're organized. John, I bet you're super organized, aren't you?
We have a CPA too, and we just hand over everything to the CPA on a monthly basis, and they just reconcile everything that we give them. We also take, I know John Jr. takes all of our receipts that we buy things from, and he puts them through the scanner that scans them into a file.
Yeah, and I think that's important, don't you? If you ever need to research something, or if you need it in the future, it's really good to have scanned receipts. And I actually have a picture on this document of my scanner that I use. It's right here. What kind of scanner do you guys use? I use the ScanSnap.
I think it's similar to that. It's very small like that.
Yeah, that's why I have the ruler here so you guys can see. And I actually just recently bought the wireless version of it, and I love it. It's amazing. And there's a really cool app so you can actually scan things wirelessly to your phone and then save it to Dropbox if you're just, I don't know, like if the family's watching a movie and you kind of want to do some work and, watch TV also. Of course, the sound of the scanner might drive people crazy, but, you get the point. You can it's very portable. It's very small and it's very powerful. I really like it. And I think it's really important for people not to get too bogged down and, oh my gosh, what do I do with receipts? Yes, receipts are a pain, but remember, those are the source documents and the details. You need to have them in some organized fashion, but really if you're using software like QuickBooks or Xero, you're importing all of the transactions on a transaction by transaction basis. So when the data pulls in and you have a receipt for 18 things and you've spent $500, what comes in is the $500. So it's up to you to know, okay, of the $500, here's the 18 things I bought. And that's where the receipts come in handy. But if you're going to Toys R Us and you pull in, a $300 transaction to Toys R Us into your software, well, that's inventory and you don't need to look at the receipt. So here's what I do. to manage my receipts, because I think this is a big headache of our business. And someone just chimed in, Neat Desk. Lisa has Neat Desk. She said, when I scan, it goes to their cloud. And that's fantastic, because then you can always access it and you scan it and then you're done with it. And then you can save it, or you can, put it in a file folder and put it away and never look at it again unless you need it.
Yeah. That might be what John has too, because I know ours goes to the cloud. And I was going to say that the purpose of that, and I love the fact that Lisa has that, is that if there's ever an incident, fire or water where your receipts get damaged or something like that, you have that right in the cloud, so you have your backup.
I agree. Or if Amazon asks a question, like, I think, TJ Maxx is a good one where the receipts aren't really clear. You want to be able to immediately get it. And, you might even want to implement a system where you have pictures of the tag with the receipt. And I don't want to get into that whole inventory management process. That's kind of John's world. But, I think having a scanner and some kind of system where you're managing what you spend and what you bought is super, super important. I mean, that's kind of the heart of our business here, which is why I wanted to show you guys what works for me is this little scanner. So what I do is I accumulate all of my receipts in one place, a folder, an envelope. I use like a manila envelope. And then I just make a habit. I go out and source, I come home, I just stick them in the envelope. And then at least monthly, I divide the receipts into piles by funding source. So I pull all the receipts out of the envelope. I have one pile for business, one pile for credit card 1, a pile for credit card 2. And I make these piles. And the reason is once I sort the receipts by funding source, I take the statement and I compare the number of receipts to the number of transactions on the statement. For example, if there are 76 receipts and 76 transactions on the statement, I know I have all of the receipts. So I can stop. I can say, okay, good. I don't sort. I don't do anything. I just scan and I move on, because I know within that 1 month of receipt population, I have everything. And I think people spend a lot of time angsting or agonizing over the receipts. It's important, but you want to get it where you're not constantly fiddling with them. If in this example, I have 76 transactions, but I only have 40 receipts, well, I better go look for some. Excuse me, because I know that I've lost a few. I think sometimes they get left in the car or in a bag, but usually you can find them if they get a little scattered. One thing that's really nice about doing online arbitrage is you a lot of times get receipts emailed, and that's you can take them and you can email them or save them to Dropbox. You can email them to Evernote. It depends on what system you're using. But that's one nice thing about online ordering.
You can kind of do that with retail arbitrage too. In a lot of the stores like Toys R Us and yeah, they'll actually send receipts to your email.
Yes, and that's really nice, because then you've got them and then you can deal with it when you get home. You also don't have to worry about something fading. They're thermal receipts, so if they get hot, they just kind of turn black. And then people ask often, how long should I save them? What should I do with them? That's something you want to check with your CPA, and it also depends on how much space you have. If you have extra space and you just want to save them to be safe, you can do that. Lisa says, as soon as I come home, I stick my receipts in a box. Every Saturday, I scan them all, and then I'm done. That is a great routine, because you're on top of it. They don't build up, and then you're not like, in March trying to do your tax return and you have 1,000 receipts. Along those lines, you want to decide if you're going to save the receipts or if you want to save them and scan a copy. There are services that will scan for you. Shoebox is one of them. I haven't used Shoebox, but I know a lot of people in my group have used Shoebox and have been happy. There are other services. Someone also mentioned Neat Receipts that just saves to the cloud. I have a 16-year-old son. He has been scanning my receipts for several years. He's very good at it, and I think it's important to have the younger members of the family participate in the family business. So he does that for me.
One other thing that we do, as far as the Neat Desk type with the cloud, we not only do that, but John, my son, what he does is after he does all the scanning of the receipt, we have an Excel file that we compile from all the places that we buy, when we bought them, how much we spent, and stuff like that. And that is more or less what we give our accountant. We just email it over to him and say, here's what we've done for the month, and he gets that, and everything else is filed in the cloud. If he needs that, we have access to that, but we don't necessarily give him the receipts. We give him the Excel sheet.
That's a really great idea. And that probably helps you too. So you can see at a glance, this is where we went, this is what we got. And it just kind of helps you have a better handle on your business. I mean, this is an inventory-based business, and inventory-based businesses are tough because there's so many details. So it's important to figure out a system that works best for you. It's not about doing it exactly like Anna says or like John says. You have to figure out what works best for you. But there should be some standards or some general, practices that you want to stick to. You want to have a good accounting software. You want to have a routine. Lisa likes to scan every Saturday. Maybe you decide that's something you want to do. Each of us has a different way we want to do it. But in general, you really want to have a consistent procedure, because the last thing you want to do is have like 3 weeks of torture as you're trying to get everything together for the entire year to get your taxes done. And that doesn't give you timely information to manage and grow your business. So I'm a big proponent of having your books in order. I mean, you guys know that. This is my pet topic. But I think part of the reason for that is I am the one who gets the messages and the phone calls where someone hasn't kept up with their books. And the next thing you know, they owe more than they realized, or they don't have enough inventory, so they don't do as well in Q4 as they hoped. So those are all of the reasons for doing it. And then also, just as I said, thinking about what personal financial goals you want your business to meet. Once you determine that, then you can set the goals and you can set the procedures, and it's a little bit easier than saying, I'm doing it because I have to do my taxes. No, you're doing it because you have these personal financial goals that matter to you. And that to me is a little bit more motivating than just doing it because it has to be done. So those are some tips I have for you guys. This is, again, the yearly accounting routine, the quarterly and the monthly. Obviously you want to customize it, but does anyone have any questions or thoughts or anything they want to share? I have at the bottom some commonly asked questions that I can go through, and then you guys can chime in. I think we've covered this to a certain extent. Do I use my receipts for entering data into my accounting software? No, you don't. As we said, the receipts are backup that provide the detail, but when you're feeding transactions from your bank account into the software, it's on a transaction by transaction basis. So again, remember the example of Target. You might have spent a couple of $100, $300 on 15 things. Well, the receipt tells you what 15 things it's for, but all the accounting software needs to know is I spent a couple $100 on inventory at Target. The next question, how long should I save my receipts? You need to talk to your CPA about this. In general, this isn't Anna telling everyone listening, but in general, the guidance is you save the receipts as long as you save the tax returns. And I think right now the IRS says 7 years. I'm not entirely sure, but I think that's what it is. So ask your CPA. What is the best?
7 years.
Oh, what?
We save ours for 7 years.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the rule of thumb. Yeah, Ada said 7 years also. Just double check. You're 8, you don't want to get rid of them and wish you'd saved them for another year, but they don't really take up that much room. So what is the best software to use? This gets asked often, and I think the top 2 contenders are Xero and QuickBooks. I think more people use QuickBooks than Xero. What I suggest is look at some tutorials to get an idea for the look and the feel of each of the software options. One of them might appeal to you more because it looks like something you've used before, or you just like how it looks. I can tell you quickly a few pros and cons. I think QuickBooks in general, based on my experience, is easier and more intuitive for people to learn. And I think about 80% of the people that try it like it. I think Xero is superior in the way that it integrates with PayPal. I also think Xero is the best choice if you are selling on multiple platforms like Amazon UK, Amazon.ca. Xero does a fantastic job with multiple currencies. I don't think QuickBooks does as good of a job, but that may not apply to everyone. Another advantage I like about QuickBooks is it's affordable. It's less expensive than Xero. I don't believe in making decisions just on what's the cheapest, but I think that Xero has so many features. If those features don't apply to you, then you might be paying for something you don't need. Let's see what else. I think there are more CPAs who are familiar with QuickBooks, and I think Xero, what's a good benefit to Xero? I think Xero also integrates more easily with multiple platforms, not just the various Amazon selling platforms, but if you're selling using Shopify and Etsy and all of the other platforms. So pros and cons to both, but I encourage you to look at each of them, read in my group about the responses. Some people switch from QuickBooks to Xero. Some people switch from Xero to QuickBooks. So spend a little bit of time before you decide and make a really good choice. Let's see. Another commonly asked question. Can I use Inventory Lab only? Inventory Lab and ScanPower reports are comparable products, so I'm just going to use the terms interchangeably. I think they're both good options. The issue with both of those choices is you don't get a balance sheet. And the reason this matters is what I was talking about originally. If you have an inventory-based business, you always want to know how much you hold in unsold inventory, but you also want to know how much you have in the bank and how much you owe in credit cards and loans. And those two software platforms are fantastic. I like them both, but they don't give you the ability to reconcile your liabilities, your credit cards and your loans, and they don't give you the ability to reconcile your checking account. So if you're using one of those as a standalone accounting solution, keep in mind what you don't get with that option. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. Just be aware of what its limitations are. So hopefully that helps. These are questions that come up a lot. I'm not going to read back through here, but remember from our discussion, we have the yearly routine, the quarterly routine, the monthly routine. We have some suggestions about how to organize the receipt monster, and then a couple of commonly asked questions. Do you guys have any other thoughts or any questions or something you want to weigh in on before we wrap up? I'm happy to stay here till the end of time, but I don't want to just read through and go on and on and on. I know accounting after a while just gets a little heavy, even though it is my pet topic.
I think they got information overload.
Well, it is a lot. John, let me ask you this. Do you feel like people need to do a better job keeping their books in order? I feel like this is kind of a pain point and people get overwhelmed and they just don't want to bother with it, or they don't know where to start. Is that your observation?
Yeah, I don't think they don't know where to start. And I think the part that you said about Inventory Lab and ScanPower is a valid answer too, is that it doesn't reconcile your checkbook or your credit cards. And let's face it, most of these people that are on Amazon are doing it with their credit cards. They don't have that kind of capital to flip over,
right,
month to month to month. I mean, when you've been on there as long as I have, we still use our credit cards, but not as bad as we used to, because we did almost, I think we did $1.8 million this year on Amazon.
Wow.
But there's a lot of, a lot of things we've learned along the way. And one of the things is that, man, when we were doing retail arbitrage in the beginning, we were spending tens of thousands of dollars, and the receipts just were a nightmare. You had to figure out a plan how to do that. And that's why having that neat desk is great. But we found that at a moment's notice, when John put it into the spreadsheets, we could just find it within seconds. You could just go in there and know exactly what you're looking for. Yeah. And then we filed them in the big boxes. You got the monthly, you can buy them at Walmart or Home Depot or Lowe's, where you can buy those boxes and file all your receipts in, and just mark the month that you put them in. Or if you've got, a few months in there with dividers in them, they work great too. So they're organized when you do have to find it. But you don't want to, when you're only looking at something and saying, how much did I spend at Walmart this month? You don't want to go back through all your Walmart receipts. You want to have a nice Excel sheet that actually breaks it down and say, oh, this is how much did I spend? And you could do that within seconds versus trying to go and pull out all those receipts.
Yep, I agree completely. And that's kind of what I was trying to emphasize. It's important to build in efficiencies and just not get bogged down in the details, because unfortunately, this is a very detail-oriented business, and it's kind of hard to know what's worth spending time on and what's not worth spending time on.
Yeah, and like I said, as you grow your business and you start to sell on other platforms, we sell on Walmart and other platforms too, and as you start to grow those platforms, let me tell you, you don't want to be dealing with those tedious things like accounting and receipts and stuff like that. I mean, I feel that and we did it from the beginning, is we recognized right off the bat, we need a CPA. We're not dealing with this.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I agree completely. And, a good pointer, if you guys think, well, I have a CPA who does my taxes and I'd like to get some bookkeeping done. Bookkeeping is an excellent candidate for outsourcing. You can ask your CPA if they have a bookkeeper in-house. And a lot of times they'll say, oh, yeah, we have someone. And it's nice because the CPA isn't doing the work, but they're reviewing the work of the bookkeeper. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. And then it makes it a little bit easier at tax time because the CPA knows your books are done right and everything's organized and good to go. So that's a good way to find a bookkeeper. If you don't have a CPA, you can ask around. I would ask if you have any local inventory-based businesses that you visit. Like I have a pet food store. I go to get food for my dogs, and I needed a new local CPA because I use a CPA to do my taxes. I feel like it's complicated. It's a nuanced field. It always is changing. And I think it's important that taxes are done right. So I actually have a CPA who does my taxes, even though I am a CPA. And so I asked the women who own the dog food, pet supply store, who do you use? And they gave me a referral, and he's fantastic. So if you don't have a CPA, you don't need one that is an e-commerce specific CPA, because it's your job to explain to the CPA, this is where my revenue comes from. These are my expenses. I think there's a little bit of a shortcut if you do have a CPA who has experience with an e-commerce based business because someone else has explained it to them. But as long as they have experience with an inventory based business, they should be able to do your taxes.
And Anna, what is your experience dealing with the Amazon sellers as being a CPA for 20 years or so? I know the biggest topic, and they're trying to pass it, Congress and the House and the Senate, taxing internet sales. And I know Amazon in certain states, you do have to, pay sales tax for the stuff that's sold because you have a presence in that state. What do you come across with people that you deal with that are selling on Amazon with that? Because I know a lot of people think that's scary to have to file taxes in all these different states.
Well, that's a really good question too. I can tell you sort of an interesting story. The CPA firm I go to has two partners, and they both in the same state in the same office have different views on Nexus, which is what you're talking about when there's a presence in a state that triggers certain filing requirements. So my suggestion is to talk to your CPA, make a decision that you personally feel comfortable with, document it, and stick with it consistently. I do think certain states kind of eyeball sellers a little more closely than others. One rule of thumb, people say, well, you should at least collect in your own state. I think that's a great place to start. But again, I don't want to give specific advice because I'm no one's CPA. I don't have an engagement letter and all of that. But I think the worst thing to do is live in fear and not make a decision. Talk to a professional, make a decision, document the decision, and then stick with it consistently. Because you're right, it isn't clear. I wish it was. I don't even think the states agree. I mean, it's crazy. There are some decisions coming down the pike that might give us some clarity, but who knows? I think it also depends on volume. If you're selling $10,000 a year, that's a lot different than selling a couple $1 million a year.
Right. And I know our CPA that we talk to basically tells us what you just said in the second part of that is just make sure you're collecting in the state that you're in. And right now they're not enforcing it in a lot of the other states. And he really said that there's nothing that we should be doing different at this time. So, and again, there's CPAs out there that'll tell you totally different that too. They say, oh yeah, you better be doing it. So it's.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have a feeling if you deal with a CPA who has a lot of e-commerce clients, they're going to fall down on the side of at least collect in your state. But, and unfortunately, it's just not clear. I think that's a great question, though. And that's even what Jen said. I have inventory in the FBA center. Does that mean you have presence in that state? I've always just collected or paid in my state. And that's a wonderful conversation to have with your CPA because you do want to make sure you have a good decision on that. And what works in one year may not be the same thing you do in another year if you're growing and, having more and more sales, and maybe you have more sales in certain states. But definitely talk to your CPA about that.
I'm so sorry about Cesar's father.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry. I hope that your father's going to be okay.
Yeah,
That's terrible.
absolutely is. My prayers are with you and your dad and your family.
I agree. I can tell you on a personal note, my father had that happen several years ago, and he had a quintuple bypass. He's fine now, healthy and doing well, but those things are always really scary, and I'm glad that he's getting the care that he needs, and I'll keep him in my thoughts also.
And I don't know if you know, just a little over a year ago, I had one in my sleep.
You did. That's right. And how are you feeling? You doing great? You look great.
I'm doing a lot better, and it's like anything else. When you're strong and you think you're invincible from your body standpoint, nothing can bother you. And then
Right.
you get slapped with that. I had my appendix burst 3 years earlier from that, and they gave me 24 hours. So those kind of things were a reality check for me as I was getting older, and kind of messed with my mind for a little while, and just kind of.
Yeah.
Because now every time I feel something, I think I'm having a heart attack. So it's just kind of an adjustment. But
Yeah.
I'm doing much better. Thank you.
Good. Well, I'm glad. And Caesar, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to get on the phone and do the whole thing with you one-on-one. So you just focus on your dad and your family and be there. And I'm always here. Accounting's not going anywhere. Just reach out to me later and we'll make sure you have the information you need. And I'll keep you and your dad in my thoughts, your entire family.
Absolutely.
Yes, definitely prayers coming your way. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground. I mean, obviously accounting we could talk about till the sun comes up the next day, and that would be very boring. But I meant what I said, not just to Caesar, but all of you guys. Reach out anytime you have questions. You're stuck on something. Check the group. If you don't see the answer there, feel free to reach out. And if I don't know the answer, I'll just refer you to John.
Yeah. The other thing, just one last topic I want to touch on.
Sure.
We all know the taxes are coming up right now, and they're due and all that. But for the people that may be on here that have already, don't want to deal with that, or already did what they wanted to do this year so far with their taxes and have already filed, new people, what kind of suggestions would you give somebody who is starting out in January and has to prepare for this for December, as far as taking those baby steps to even get them to where they condition themselves to be able to do something?
Oh, that's such a great question, because we were talking a lot about if you already have accounting in place and what do you do? I think the number one thing is honestly look at an inventory system like Scan Power Reports or Inventory Lab, where you're just at least tracking your inventory. Accounting systems are an evolution. No one starts off day one with the perfect system and they say, wow, I never had to change a thing. And hopefully that'll take some pressure off of all of you, because no one starts off with the perfect process in place. So actually baby stepping a little bit, I would get a good system in place for receipt management. John had a good suggestion about the Neat scanner or Neat receipt scanner. I told you how you could have an envelope and save them and scan them. Master the receipts. You should also have a way to track what you paid for inventory, which is why I suggest Inventory Lab or Scan Power Reports as an example. Or you can get used to running the reports out of Amazon yourself. Once you know how to calculate cost of goods sold, then you can add on something like QuickBooks or Xero. But really, you just want to take it one thing at a time. There are a lot of things you can do on a smaller scale that are not so overwhelming, but at a certain point you have to remember this is an inventory-based business and there's a lot of accounting involved. That doesn't mean it should discourage you from doing it, but if that means taking like a class at your local SBA, the Small Business Administration, on accounting for a business, you could do one of those in a half a day or a day, and they're not very expensive. I will tell you that I personally took a class at my local SBA on how to have an import-export business, and it was the best $89 I think I've ever spent on my business. It was a day-long thing, and it told me so much about how to import inventory from other countries into the United States, and that's actually why I'm going to India next month to buy fabrics for my private label line if it wasn't for that class. So there's a lot of very affordable learning opportunities. There are great opportunities in our community. Another thing that you can do that I think is a fantastic idea, if you work with, or if you have a friend who's a seller that's been working longer than you, ask them if they'll mentor you and just kind of explain their system to you. You don't have to, go meet them in person, but maybe an hour or two phone call for 6 weeks, once a week would be something helpful. but just start small and then remember it's an evolution. You're learning a new language and you can build on it.
Yeah, and the one thing I would add to that is that when you're doing that and you do learn a system and you have a system down, at that point, once you know what you want and how to perform it yourself, you need to outsource it. You need to get it out of your hands and get it into a VA, teach them how to do it, put videos out there for the VA, show them step by step what you want to do, and concentrate on the things that you want to do. And that's basically just buying product and selling product and making money. You really don't want to be dealing with the accounting side of it or any of that matter. I mean, there's things that are fun and there's things that are not fun. To me, it's not fun doing accounting. That's why I don't do it. That's why
I agree. That's why I don't do my own taxes. That's not fun for me. It's a lot to keep up with. It's a lot of detail. I outsource getting my taxes done. And that's why I mentioned earlier, bookkeeping is a wonderful candidate to outsource. There's not a lot of judgment. And it's something that, you know, a lot of people can do. You can look online for a QuickBooks Pro advisor in your area. You can search by zip code. The problem happens when there's an issue of time and money. So someone may have more time than money and they think, well, I can't really afford a bookkeeper now, but eventually it costs you time, and that's the scarce resource. So think about that as you're trying to figure out how to get more time to do your business.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's like anything. I mean, not even just your accounting. I mean,
yeah,
you can, you know, and I'm not plugging myself here because you can use anybody, but if you're buying product and you're handling it, you can only do as much as you're able to do. At some point in time, you want to outsource that. Get it to a fulfillment center. Let them do the work for you. You know, and you just concentrate on buying what you need to buy and making the money. We have tons of international clients that, you know, that's what they do. And you just, one thing I can tell you, I learned from Jim Corcoran, and it took a while to get it into my head, is because, you know, we all look at our businesses as mine. Nobody can do it like us. Well, there are people out there that can do it, and even better than us if you let them. And you find the right people. There's experts out there that know things that you don't know, and that's what I learned, and learn how to put systems and management systems in place, as well as, you know, teams in place, so that I'm allowed to do the things like I want to do and enjoy, like webinars and stuff like this. I couldn't be doing these type of things, and I do them during the day too, and things like that. And I couldn't do that if I didn't have systems in place and you know, the people in place to be able to perform the tasks that I know I can do, but I don't need to be doing.
I agree. And it doesn't even have to be ongoing. And I'll give you an example. I was having an issue because I do accounting, you know, with my accounting group and all of that, but I also source inventory. So I kind of feel like I have this split personality, and I was having a little bit of a workflow issue in my office. Like I had to have this office, but then I had to have an inventory processing thing. And I figured out that Anna, was the bottleneck. So I hired a professional organizer to come in for 3 hours, and she completely revamped my workspace. And I cannot tell you what a difference it's made in my workflow. I have designated areas. I have a system. It's all documented. And all I did was pay someone for 3 hours of time. And in about a couple of weeks, she paid for it. You know, her expertise paid for herself with the time I got. And now I'm so much more efficient because of it. So it could be something little that you get help with, just a one-time thing that makes a big difference in your business. And I encourage you, like John said, where are your bottlenecks? Where are you getting in your own way? How can you make that better? Because we don't have to know everything. Just because we're an entrepreneur, I think you're right. We get this idea in our head like, oh, I have to do everything. Well, no, you really don't. And there are a lot of people that know how to do it better than you. And yes, it might be an investment of your money, but in the end, it pays for itself and then some. So think about that little story as the example. And I kind of felt like, oh, this is silly. But the way she helped me redo my workflow so that I could have a desk space and then also to process inventory has been a lifesaver for me. I feel so much more efficient now. And it was just 3 hours. That's all it took. And it also gave someone who had a small business in my community some revenue. So I felt really good about that.
Yeah, I had the same type of experience. It was a one-day thing, and I don't know if you know. You know who Ray Perry is, right?
Yes, I do.
Ray Perry's a good friend of mine. She came down to my warehouse, and she said, I want to come down and take a look at your warehouse. And do you mind if I give you some advice if I see things that you could be doing better? And you know, if I didn't have an open mind, and I said, who are you to come down and I had an open mind. And the one thing I think that we all get lost in is that when we're in our space, we only see our space from our perspective, and having somebody come in as, you know, not been there, that's brand new, that comes in and walks around, they can see things differently that we're blinded to seeing. And
Yes.
one day she came in and suggested a bunch of things, and I put all those things in place. And she told me, she says, you need to have a manager over here, and you need to have somebody running that. I was running my office. And she basically came in and said, you need to be doing this, and you need to have a person running this office. This is not something you should be doing. And now I have people that do it. But it was just that one day she just came in and she says, you know what? And we went out to lunch after she came in, and I was waiting for it. And she just came out and gave all these suggestions, and I put a lot of the things into place. And I thank her so much for that, because it's made my life a lot easier. I agree. I think like what you did with the person that came in and revamped your system, if you don't have an open mind, if you have a closed mind, then we're not going to get anywhere. You got to be open to suggestions, open to change, and open to someone that's willing to help you. And I think a lot of times we're closed-minded and we think that, our way is the best way, and it may not necessarily be that.
I agree. Or we think, oh, there's no one that can fix this for me. I've created my own little mess here. I just have to deal with the system that's evolved. And,
exactly.
Being open-minded also means being honest with ourselves, what isn't working. So I agree. That's a cool story. You had a similar experience. So, and if we identify our bottlenecks, I promise you there's a solution. What we're doing isn't magic. There are millions of people selling online. There are millions of people selling stuff. This selling inventory has been around, for ages. So think about how you can do things better and, make this a really amazing year. I'm very excited about what's to come. And I think that talking about account you could work towards, and what you might even want to outsource because you don't want to do it.
Absolutely. So, Anna, it's been a pleasure having you here. Before we go, though, I want to give the people that are on here the opportunity, as well as the ones that will get the replay of this. If they want to reach out and contact you, what kind of information can you give us to be able to contact you?
Well, if you guys are interested, you're welcome to join my free accounting group, Accounting We Will Go. It's free. It's accounting for e-commerce sellers. And the files are chock full of information. Everything you need to know about accounting for your e-commerce business is there. You're also welcome to private message me anytime. People do it all the time, and I don't mind at all.
Can you post that in the chat so they have that?
Sure. I'll do that right now. Let me just get a link real quick to the group, and I will share that here. And that way people listening will have the group address as well. And again, it's Accounting We Will Go.
And I think the one thing that Anna would agree, that I would agree, is that if you don't know something, and don't let it bottleneck you and get you stuck. If there's something that you're trying to do and you don't know how to do it, there's plenty of people out there that are expertise in those fields of things that you're trying to get done.
Right.
Get contact with them. I mean, you can go to a lot of these places and get VAs or just get all kinds of help. So make sure that if it's something that's bottlenecking you and you say, well, I don't know how to do this, I'm not going to do it. No, get information. There's plenty of groups out there. Jim Cochran's group, my group, there's plenty of groups out there where the people are just openly willing to help you and give advice and point you in the right direction. And that is the one way that I grew, is by, not being closed-minded and making sure I had an open mind and listening to the people that know more about me in the areas that I don't know.
Exactly. And, that's actually why my group is free. It was my way of giving back to the community that's been so generous, not just to me, but other colleagues and seller friends I have, and those who are just starting. So, I think the more we give, the more we get. And reaching out and sharing is really important. And then reaching out and asking for help is really important too.
Absolutely. Hey, we made it. We did 1 hour. So.
Wow. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging in there. I appreciate it. Reach out anytime with questions. And thank you, John, for the opportunity to come on and talk about something that is very important to me.
I appreciate you coming on, and God bless you and your family. And I wish you nothing but the best. And thank you guys for coming on here and listening to this. And for the ones that will get the replay, there's a lot of information here. The nice thing about the video is that you can actually take your time and walk yourself through it, step by step, watch it, replay it, and pick up the things that you need to do. But I guess the biggest thing about with the accounting part that we're talking with Anna here is to take action. Make sure that, you know, you're not waiting till next December to put everything together and try to file it at that point. Let me tell you, been there, done that. It's a headache. You don't want that.
Yes.
You want to make sure and learn from the ones that have been there, done that. If we're telling you you've been there, done that, it's not a very good experience. Not that we don't want you to experience it, because we think that everyone should experience the hardship we went through, but but if we can save you that pain and tell you to do these steps, that's what it's all about, is trying to just help others so that they have a much less of a learning curve.
I agree. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.